Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. Today, we're continuing our series on the Tome of Heroes, talking about the new races and subclasses and other player features that can be found in this book. Today, we're actually covering a series of sub-races. Because the original player's handbook had lots of races that were automatically included in the game, there were several sub-races. Dwarves have both the hill and the mountain. Elves had both the high elf and the wood elf and the drow elf. And this book has definitely expanded on several of those options. And today we're talking about another one of those. Halfling sub-races. This book assumes that halflings that you build still use the player's handbook chassis. So you've still got a +2 to your dexterity, you've still got, small size, 25-foot speed, the lucky trait, which gives you that reroll on nat ones, the advantage against fear. It's all there in the base halfling, and these sub-races that we find in the book are just adding on to that. We'll get into the details in just a moment, but before we do, I'd like to let you know, Relaxed Fantasy Review has memberships. For just $1 a month, you can support me here on YouTube and get a couple benefits. First, you get a little badge next to your name in the comments, letting folks know that you're a supporter, but also you get early access to my videos. I upload videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I upload them a day early for members only. If that interests you, you can click the join button just down there below the video. It's right next to the subscribe button. And I'd love to see you in the comments with your member badge. And if it doesn't interest you, that's totally fine. Just liking the video, subscribing to the channel, watching it, just being here and watching my videos is a great way to support me. I really appreciate you. Thank you for watching my content. So let's talk halfling sub-races. In the player's handbook, we had the Lightfoot and the Stout halflings. And here we have a myriad of others. 5, in fact. We have the court folk halfling. These are what you would consider more upper class halflings that you would see among the high classes of society. They get a natural +1 to their charisma. Charisma being, in my opinion, the best mental stat, working in both social situations and with lots of casters. I say that a +1 in that is worth an 8 out of 10. And then they have the Boon Companion feature. And the Boon Companion feature states that when they take the help action, which is obviously a good thing to do in combat if you are a support character, you also get to add a d4 to the help. So help is what you would do if someone's doing an ability check or an attack, and you're going to give them advantage on that check. This also adds a d4 to it, which almost feels like Bless or Guidance. 2 amazing spells, but this just happens. You don't need the cantrip, you don't need the spell, you don't need concentration. You just use the help action and add the d4 with it. And that is a fantastic feature. It works best, I would say, when you're out of combat, so this would just stack on to any skill set challenge you're doing. But even in combat, this would make me think twice before attacking myself and helping someone else attack, adding to their rolls. And it stacks with those other spells. I'm giving this 10 out of 10. They also have the Wee Glamour feature, and Wee Glamour says that they have advantage against charm, so that adds on to the halfling's natural advantage against fear, and even advantage against any enchantment spell. Hold and Dominate, and any other spell from the enchantment school. That's a great advantage to add on to the already stacked halfling resiliences, so I say that's a 9 out of 10, and I give the court folk a 9 out of 10. A really solid addition for sure. Then you have a different one, the Hinter folk. Hinterfolk are basically a very nimble halfling that is a little more sturdy and wilderness-based. They're like hunters and folks that live in the forests and such. They get a +1 to their strength. Strength is a little more of a niche skill. I mean, lots of martial classes use it, but casters don't really care for it, and dex-based characters also don't really care for it. It is often a dump stat, or it's your most important. Given that, I say a +1 is a 6 out of 10. Only really useful if that's what you're focused on. Then you get the highly mobile traits. This ups your natural 25-foot speed to 30, so now you're as fast as the medium-sized races. And if you're wearing light armor or no armor, you gain a 20-foot swimming speed and a 20-foot climbing speed. This greatly increases your maneuverability, and I think that this is a really, really solid addition. Swimming and climbing can be tricky even if you are a strength-based character, and just adding the speeds in there, I mean, it's a shame they're not 30 feet, they're 20 feet, but I'll take it. I think this is a phenomenal addition, and I'm also going to give it 10 out of 10. Then finally, you've got Hunter and Gatherer, which just simply grants you proficiency in the survival skill, which is a decent skill. It's not always useful, but it comes in handy quite a bit. So I'm going to say 7 out of 10 for that. And overall, I give the Hinterfolk an 8 out of 10. That mobile feature is really solid. The other two are, kind of mid. Next up, we have the River Folk. River folk, obviously folks that live by the rivers. They're often fisher folk, boat people, and they are very in tune with kind of natural river stuff, almost a little like Native Americans, perhaps. They get a +1 to their strength as well. Like I discussed earlier, that's a 6 out of 10. Then they have the River's Child trait. River's Child says that they have advantage on athletics and animal handling checks that are related to river-based things. So swimming in the water, working with river-based animals. That is an incredibly niche skill set. I mean, it's nice that you get advantage in 2 separate skills, but it's only in a favored terrain, I guess you'd say, in a river area. It's helpful when it's helpful, and otherwise it's not a thing. Like, it's not going to come up if you're in any other biome. So I say another 6 out of 10 for that. And then they have the sure-footed traits. This gives them advantage on acrobatics checks to keep their balance specifically. And slippery surfaces, such as ice or oil or just wet surfaces, don't count as difficult terrain. The justification here that they're used to walking on docks or in, wet areas. It's kind of nice. I mean, a lot of acrobatics checks have to do with balance, so it is advantage on acrobatics more often than it's not. Slippery surfaces being difficult terrain might come up. I say that's a 7 out of 10. Overall, I say the River Folk are 8 out of 10, but they're a low 8 out of 10. Not quite as good as the Hinterfolk, because most of their features are a little more tailored to their specific environment and won't work in other areas. Speaking of specific environments, how about the urban half-folk? These are halflings that live in the cities and kind of work as inner city folks. They get a +1 to their intelligence, arguably the most niche skill in the game, the most common dump stats, and only really intelligence-based casters care about it. So I'm going to give a +1 in that, a 5 out of 10. They also get any tool proficiency of their choice, or if they prefer, they can take a skill proficiency from a list. It includes animal handling, performance, persuasion, medicine's on there. A decent list for sure. None of the top tier picks are in there, maybe persuasion. But the fact that you can just choose any of those skills or any tool at all that you like is a nice amount of variety, and it lets you customize your character in a good way. I say that's 9 out of 10. Then you've got Lost in the Crowd. This is a funny one, which says that you can take the hide action if you're in a crowd of 10 or more humanoids. So the idea is that you're used to ducking into crowds and getting lost amongst them. The hide action usually requires that you be completely obscured, heavily or total cover or whatever. But this says, no, you can just duck into crowds and hide. Handy, for sure. I could definitely see this being good with a rogue so that they can just weave into a crowd. And I say it could definitely come in handy in cities. And cities are more common, I would say, biomes. You often find yourselves in crowded areas, so I'd say 7 out of 10 for that. And then you get something called Street Cant. Street Cant is a halfling common mishmash of a language which greatly resembles Thieves' Cant. Thieves' Cant being the special coded language of rogues. But this is just a racial specific version of that. This is both awesome and useless in the respect that if there is another urban halfling or someone who you teach street cant to, that's great because now you have a shared language that basically no one else speaks. But thieves' cant can usually achieve the same thing. But it does count as a language because magic can decipher it. If someone uses magic, like comprehend languages, it actually can be deciphered. It's a very weird ability. And I love languages. I think languages are one of the best roleplay elements in D&D and can be handy in a myriad of situations. This isn't one of them. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 because, again, I love languages, but this doesn't really feel like it's going to come up ever unless your campaign is specifically in an urban halfling environment. And I give the urban halfling an 8 out of 10 as well. Some decent stuff in here, but definitely some swings and misses. And then finally in this book you have the winter folk. Winter folk, exactly what they sound like, biomes in the tundra and the snow. These are halflings that are very familiar with the high altitude and the snow-covered regions. They get a +1 to their constitution. One of the best things to get your +1 in, because everyone likes a nice boost to their con, giving you better hit points and better stamina. +1, I say 7 out of 10. Then they have the hardened traits. This gives them advantage on checks against cold environments. So if you're in a cold environment, you have to like resist it, otherwise you get exhausted and slowed, and this just gives them advantage on that. But more importantly, when you take a long rest, you can recover all of your exhaustion. Normally, if you have multiple levels of exhaustion, you only lose 1 whenever you take a long rest. This says you lose all of them, which is actually really big. It means you don't have to be afraid of things that exhaust you as much because a long rest just takes care of it all. That's a very unique feature and I really like it. I say 9 out of 10 for hardened. And then you have the old soul feature. This allows you to use your wisdom modifier instead of your intelligence modifier to make history and religion checks. And I like that. I think that history and religion, it makes sense that they're intelligence-based. Like, I get it. Because it's all about what you know from history. It's your knowledge. But the fact that you can't swap it out for just your, like, intuitive knowledge about the world and culture and the gods and the spirits, I think that using wisdom makes a lot of sense in certain situations, and the fact that this subrace just kind of gives that to you, I like it, and I think it's worth an 8 out of 10. And I think the winter folk are worthy of an 8 out of 10, a high 8 out of 10. I quite like what they're doing here. And that's it. Those are the 5 halfling subraces that you get here in the Tome of Heroes. Lots of variety, lots of unique features. I'm really a fan of the court folk, that additional help and the extra advantages and the charisma. It really sells itself to me. But any of the others could work. If their story and their playstyle sounds right to you, you should use them. None of them are bad. And when they're tacked on to the main version of the halfling, you've got yourself a really, really solid character. None of them break the game. And I think that you should talk to your DM if any of the halflings, court folk, hinterfolk, river folk, urban, and winter folk, if any of those appeal to you, talk to your dungeon master about including them in your next game. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe down below. Have a look for the join button down there, as well as a link that I'll leave to the Tome of Heroes. It was written by Cobalt Press, and it was released as a addition to 5th edition D&D. It's a great supplement, and I highly recommend you check it out for yourself. Have a good one, my friends.